briefly like to give the floor to Mr. Creamer to introduce his team to the conference.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. So one thing I didn't get to say before that I will now is that I'm supported by an extraordinary team throughout ICAO, both in headquarters and in the regional offices. And several of our regional office staff, technical officers, and some of the deputy directors are here with us for the conference. I'm sure you'll have a chance to interact with them through the conference, and they add enormous value to the work that we've done preparing here. Within the Air Navigation Bureau, we have 3 deputy directors who I'd like to introduce to you and who are on the podium with us to listen to your input and insight into the future. First, closest to me, Mr. Catalin Radu is the Deputy Director for Safety, responsible for the safety strategy at ICAO. At the far end of the podium from me is Mr. Richard McFarland, otherwise known as MACA. Richard is the Director for Air Navigation Services and responsible for all of the Committee A activities. He is the the Secretary for Committee A, and the Secretary for Committee B is Mr. Radu. Between them is essentially our regulator. Mr. Denis Guindon is the Deputy Director for Monitoring and Oversight, and he's responsible for the conduct of the USOP audit and oversight program at ICAO. So with that short introduction, I just wanted to make it very clear that we're here to listen to you. And sometimes it's hard to hear, but we're really looking for the insights on the right direction and the changes that you propose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. So what I'd like to do now is to open the floor for any comments and thoughts on the 4 questions that are on the screen that Steve outlined to us earlier, earlier this morning and again this afternoon. If you would like to make a comment on any one of these, please go ahead and press the microphone button. The button will light up as green, which means that you're on the list. And when it turns red, your microphone will be live. So I will call out the states as they appear on my screen. And when you hear me call your state name, your microphone will go red, and then you will be clear to speak. So I think Steve's made it quite clear that the Secretariat are here to listen. So with that, we open the floor to you. And I would like to give the floor to France, please.
Thank you very much. My first remark is about... Pardon, oui, je suis traduit.
Sorry, there is interpretation, says the speaker. My French is much better than my English. My first remark is on the GASP and the GAMP. These 2 plans are just that. They're plans. They need a measure of stability, duration, and they shouldn't be changed too often. Otherwise, states will not genuinely be able to implement them. So my feeling is that the current tempo of around 6 years between 2 meetings, 2 sessions of this Air Navigation Conference is perfectly appropriate. We shouldn't make it briefer. However, it would certainly be useful to have a midterm point at the assembly in between, which would not be a revision of the GASP or the GAN, but which would be a progress report, because when you're tracking a plan, you need to see periodically how much progress has been made and whether it's run smoothly. And then I wanted to stress a second issue, which is related to the progress where we need to be making an effort. Many technologies are coming to the fore, and they may wreak major change. The most obvious one is that of drones. And behind drones, you have this idea of having an automatic device, and we're not far away from automatic flight. And then you have a pilot operating the device, but with the ultimate ability to recover control from the ground if things go wrong with the automated systems, because we cannot have a failure of the machine leading the passengers into danger. And ultimately, we might ask similar questions about a number of other matters. For example, in Europe, we're envisaging developing remote tower control systems, and we would need to analyze safety in the light of that as well. So for us, all of these issues require specific work in ICAO. And lastly, without going into great detail, I would mention the question of cybersecurity, which almost goes without saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much, France. I would next like to give the floor to Rwanda.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chairperson. And the presentation was very good. However, it was very detailed. I may have missed one or two things, so I would like to know if the presentation will be made available. Thank you.
Thank you very much for confirming the presentations will be made available via the app, I guess, and online. Thank you. I would like to give the floor next to Austria, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you for giving us the opportunity also address informal the ongoings and the GAMP and the GASP and the developments to it. We see that the GAMP and the GASP are really crucial instruments, crucial documents, very helpful for the community. However, we see that there should be a smooth alignment also to integrate RPAS and also probably security risk pictures to take those into account. And last but not least, I would like to mention that the role of the human is very essential. We must not forget the human element in the system and make sure that staff member also part of stakeholder involvement, taking their needs into account to make them part of the system and not a barrier in such. For that, we could think that also change management could be helpful to have it in form of a guidance material also. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Austria. So we've had two comments now on the GASP and the GAMP and integrating new technologies and the role of the human in that. There's some other questions up on the screen about implementation support and big picture priorities and whether these divisional type meetings are a good way of proceeding. So it would be interested to hear on those topics. And I'd like to give the floor now to the United States.
In regards to the focus of ICAO implementation support, due to the unique operational environments of each ICAO region, it could be beneficial to provide more support to each ICAO regional office on what would be beneficial for the respective region to address within the context of the GASP and the GAMP. As new technologies enter the global system, the approach must remain focused on integration.
Thank you, United States. Dominican Republic, we'd like to hear your views.
Yes, greetings to everyone. First and foremost, we would like to thank the organizers of this navigation conference for the excellent hospitality afforded us. As regards what the approach of ICAO should be to the implementation process, the Dominican Republic would like to refer to how important it is to view training as one of the crucial elements. Previous mention was made of how important the human factor is, and indeed, in order to be able to carry out actions related to implementation of safety aspects and the GAMP, it is important for the human resources to be properly trained and equipped in a timely fashion before these implementation processes begin, so that this doesn't become an obstacle for implementation to proceed smoothly. At present, there are major constraints at the stage of preparing training in some states. This is a result of formalizing these training processes, which have been developed locally in each of those states. So we understand that one of the key focuses, again, is the mechanism for preparing and imparting training, so that that training is planned and prepared in a proactive fashion, so that the personnel are duly informed of what is going to happen and how the processes are going to unfold and what knowledge they need to possess. And all of that training needs to be focused effectively with the necessary skills. Very often over the years we've seen personnel being trained with theoretical knowledge, but when it comes to executing certain initiatives, they face constraints. So that is our opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominican Republic. I would now like to give the floor to Venezuela.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Well, the joint effort of states and regions is to lay the basis for the world aeronautical system. Now, all of this has to be tested in the light of global realities as well as regional and local realities when it comes to implementation. That is the challenge for each of these plans. We consider that the organization of these priorities should be based on emerging risks and a process of transition, seeking to strike a balance between safety and security. Issues have been mentioned, such as investment of states in technology and so on. Existing individuals and new actors may also come to play as we venture into new fields. And there's this interaction with the system with respect to the required competence for all of these interactions, both environmentally and in the operational area. And of course, one cannot overlook the concept of management in state systems and in industry, as well as the relationship between the two. And of course, the GAMP and GASP are geared to more pragmatic and clear priorities, facilitating investment priorities, and how best to gauge results in order to make the necessary enhancements. Of course, any endeavor can be improved, and we think there's a need to foster joint analyses of the RASC and peer groups in support of both plans, whether they're merged or not, in order to strike a balance between capacity and safety. And then as regards the implementation approach, well, this has to be established on the basis of results and compliance, on the basis of documents. It is possible that there will be compliance, but the approach might be geared more to genuine empowerment of these documents with real tools. And there's also this question of training and effective methodologies, which are new and innovative. It's going to be important to guarantee the skills of the personnel in a shorter period of time. That is going to be the major challenge, time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venezuela. The next speaker we have is the Netherlands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few issues for further discussion. I would like to think that on question 1, security, not only cybersecurity, but security in a broader perspective should be taken on board. After all, we all have to manage the risk to an acceptable level of safety, so we should be aware of those risks, including security. The second question, could be helpful to work in a smaller scale within meetings like this, smaller scales, but more often in a region where the prime subject would be to learn from good practices. I think that deserves a little bit more attention. There is so much to learn from each other, but it starts with coming together and listen to each other, and then we can learn, everybody can learn from each other. So I think it would be a good idea to work in more that direction. Item 3, I think it should be risk-based, but on the other hand, also on the request should be possible. I think there are some countries that could be helped with an ICAO implementation support, maybe not because of the bad results, but because they have a feeling they got lost somehow, somewhere, and it could be possible upon the request to help those countries. And item number 4, I think it should be useful to think that government and service providers should be working together, not only service providers commercially, but also general aviation. And by working together with the respective SSP and the SMSs, I think there is much to learn from each other. And if you don't know each other, you don't help each other. And it starts with knowing each other and working together for an optimum result could help in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Netherlands. Next, I would like to call on Greece.
Thank you very much, and I thank also for the very rich presentation. On GASP and GAMP now, I understand that states need time to digest and then to implement, and of course we need to see them giving results. But we would like also to see in the near future whether we are preparing any plans to see the two plans converge. And I would like to have some input on that also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greece. Brazil, please.
Grazie, signora Presidente.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. We in Brazil support the comments made by the United States. It's very important to strengthen the regional offices since each region has its own specificities, and it's important to strengthen the regional approaches for developing the plans in the regions. But there's also an important need for exchange of information between offices so there's better global harmonization of the experience of each region, with a view to global harmonization. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Bangladesh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We know that ICAO has a very wonderful implementation mechanism and by the use of CMA, but the states are also striving hard to make this implementation very effective because of certain points. I want to raise the few points is that retention of the sufficiently qualified people in the regulator, because the regulators, when they are employed by the state and when they go for auditing and inspecting the service providers, they are much better paid. And that's a very difficult position for the states to retain the qualified people in the regulation side. So this one, the implementation is very good, but if we cannot retain our people in the regulation side, then it will be the implementation is not effective. So the ICAO should also have some mechanism for the states who are suffering for this retention problem, should make a note of this, and the implementation focus should be addressed to that side also. And as the ATM is unfolding, I mean, we are talking about the seamless ATM sky, and then the question of cybersecurity also is coming in. So that the focus should be on their side also, that this issue becomes very dominant in the less developed countries, because we use certain softwares and certain facilities which can be broken down by the cyber attackers. So if you want to have an implementation which is very good, we should also focus on how to contain the system in its own domain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bangladesh. I'd now like to call on Nepal.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Implementation of GASP and GAN is still challenging in national level among the developing countries. new Global Safety Plan, document 2020-22, which is still in draft version, has provided the guidelines to implement the GASP. In APAC region, ICAO has recently organized a workshop on the preparation of state plan on national safety plan on state level a few months ago. However, it is yet to be materialized on state level. We think there also needs some harmonization between GAFs and GAMP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nepal. Colombia.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The aviation authorities are seeing exponential growth in the aviation market and major challenges that we have to address in terms of efficiency, capacity, and safety. We must reach these targets and key points that were identified in ICAO. We have to strike a balance among the objectives in a safe and secure way. And for this reason, we believe that perhaps not right away, but at some point, ICAO should reach a point where the GASP and the GAMP will merge. They'll come together. And it could be achieved in a single effort and not in two separate plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. In response to the questions posed, the UK sees the GASP and the GAMP completely harmonised in the future, maximising the safety benefits of improved navigation technologies and ensuring that we balance properly safety with the efficiency, capacity and environmental benefits of those new technologies. ICAO implementation support should, as much as possible, be to facilitate states to do the right thing, connecting those who have the resources with those with the need through GASOS and other similarly innovative programmes. This is essential if we as regulators are to remain relevant and proportionate as the pace of change continues to increase and traffic continues to grow. Mr. Creamer asked about big picture priorities. To that, we would say that the statistics tell a story of growth and the implications of that growth that is really compelling. And coupled with the new technologies that have been raised many times, such as space, cyber, and drones, that already today suggests that ICAO's priorities are well-founded. And finally, as far as meetings such as this are concerned, I think we can do much using modern communication technologies. But there are times when there is just no substitute for bringing the community together in person to debate important topics and genuinely feel the temperature of the community around the world. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Next, I'd like to give the floor to Ecuador.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ecuador would like to express its thanks to the distinguished presenters, and we certainly agree that regional offices should be strengthened, as other distinguished delegates have pointed out. We are also certain that the two overall plans, the GASP and the GAMP, of the organization are of vital importance to states and to the future of air navigation. And at this conference, we are seeking to have harmonization across the two major plans. Looking at the two plans, the main thing we believe is to achieve actual implementation in states of the two plans. And states should be afforded the opportunity, as ICAO always says, that no country should be left behind, and that is the crux of global harmonization. And we need to be realistic in our implementation phases. Regional offices need to be strengthened, and as a conference deliverable, we could have the new goals, emerging issues such as cybersecurity and also artificial intelligence, and UAVs and RPAS. Thank you.
Thank you, Ecuador. Next, I'd like to call on Senegal.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Following those who spoke before me, I strongly support these plans, and I believe that they need to be effectively implemented in support of the development of air navigation and also to ensure aviation safety. These two plans can continue apace together, but I do think that there should be effective dovetailing between the two plans so as to enhance implementation in the respective areas. So that's the only thing I have to add to what speakers before me have said. As is the case currently with the PERGs and the RASCs, we must find points of convergence that will enable us to properly implement the GAMP. And once the GAMP is implemented, we need to be able to enhance and strengthen the safety dimension. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senegal. Next, I'd like to call on Canada, please.
Canada has witnessed firsthand the benefits of ICAO's coordinated cooperation by its regional offices. Working on tailored assistance that can reach a grouping of states allows us to maximize our efforts and measure progress more effectively. Canada would like to see this regional approach continue with more focused guidance within and among regions, while also leveraging ICAO's various assistance funds to achieve consistent approaches to support.
Thank you very much, Canada. Germany, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I carefully listened the different vocabulary that has been used when GAMP and GASP were addressed. I heard harmonization, I heard integration, I heard merging, I heard interrelation, I heard interlinkage. I think we need clarity what we really mean. I don't see at this moment that really the one would be integrated or even merged with the other one. There's clearly an interrelation, interlinkage, but that's something which, in my view, has to be investigated further. To what extent the GASP or the safety aspect interrelates with air navigation. So there is an interrelation, no doubt about that, but I don't see really in merging as I could listen now with the interventions. Also, let's take one example, safety. The behavior of the states, of the regulators, of the safety oversight of the authorities, even of ICAO, has a consequence, has an influence on safety, which is not something which immediately has to be merged with air navigation, with the technical subject of air navigation. So, in essence, I think we need clarity on, do we talk on interrelation, interlinkage? Yes. How far we go with the well, harmonization also already, let's say with the harmonization of those bones plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Germany. An important point of clarification, because if we don't all know what we mean when we're talking, then we don't get very much further. Thank you. I'd like to hear from South Africa, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to approach or make my intervention on behalf of South Africa with regards to the ICAO implementation support. The no country left behind becomes very important, particularly as we are looking at what is next and what is to follow. As the UAVs, UAS, traffic management, flight level 600, the big data, the trust relationships that comes into play, as well as automation. Therefore, I would suggest that ICAO should take stock and prioritize their support on states that are still struggling or grappling with the implementation of air navigation plans in far as the ATM systems of such states, as this may have a knock-on effect into a wider ATM efficiencies and state safety. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I'd now like to hear from IATA, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and a good afternoon to all. Just a couple of words on the suggestions as explained by Germany of some sort of merger between GASP and GAMP. There's no doubt there needs to be true coordination between those two plans and the RASG and the PERGs. But it's very important to note that the RASG is an instrument of the implementation of safety management systems and state safety programs. If we want a system that identifies risk at the state level and produces a state plan, and that converges into a regional safety plan, and the overview of those plans in the region, the body to do that is the RASG, and it needs to be concentrated on its work and not merged with an implementation plan like the PERG. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, IATA. Next, we'd like to hear from Canso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak as an observer. We obviously support very strongly both the GASP and the GAMP, but like other speakers, we believe that there is a case for much better harmonization of integration of the two plans using a much more common format and language. We have traditionally said that ICAO is the what of aviation, and industry associations like CANSO, IATA and ACI are the how. So when it comes to implementation of ICAO plans, there is a compelling case, in our view, for much stronger involvement of the industry associations. We therefore wish to propose an enhanced dialogue between ICAO and the industry associations on support for implementation. This is often discussed, as at this conference, at a generic level, but we should demystify this by being clear on what we mean, being clear on the requirements, particularly given the different capabilities and maturities of states and their air navigation service providers. We should identify best practices and share them more widely, as proposed by the Netherlands earlier. And we should define some more specific action plans to really ensure that implementation happens effectively on a global basis. CANSO is more than willing to play its part in such an activity, and I will follow up on this with the Air Navigation Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canso. I don't have any other speakers calling for the floor just for the moment, so just to summarize a little bit of what I've heard, but I know Steve has been taking furious notes, but I sort of sense wide support for the GASP and the GAMP, and certainly a wide support for some kind of harmonization, dovetailing, interrelation. The verb is... there's various verbs that have been used of those two documents, and that states feel that implementation of those documents is very important, and states need the tools and the training in order to do that, particularly considering the human in the system. I heard comments about implementation support should be prioritized based on risk and other no country left behind priorities, and also calls for the fact that meetings such as this, where face-to-face communication takes place, is very important, perhaps considering doing them more frequently on a regional level. But, you know, sort of working together and sharing, including industry, but all learning from each other, and best practice seems to be valued by the people in the room. Strong support for the regional offices and strengthening regional office supports. So those are just some of the themes that I've noted down, but just wondering if there's any other or opposing views or other views on any of these four questions. We're all in wild agreement. Okay. Okay, I'll let Steve take the floor for a minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think that the what I've heard is, for concerning the first question, is valuable for us to work to make sure that the two plans are usable by our safety community and our air navigation community in a pair. Although we recognize the emphasis by some of those people is different depending upon what their role and their job is. And that we should be working more closely with the regional groupings to make sure that there are components of the plans that can be easily broken out for use in the regions. And I think that that's work that is ongoing. I'm hearing the implementation support is welcome, that you would like to see more support at the local level, and that's encouraging because in the Secretariat we believe that the regional offices are essentially the retail delivery of ICAO support and planning for the states and their regions. I didn't hear too much criticism of the big picture priorities. And so what I'm hearing from the interventions that we saw is that the current set of working papers and plans reflects perhaps the best effort that is possible given the disparate number of stakeholders involved in utilizing our airspaces between commercial operations, military users, general aviation, emerging entrants, that it really is truly hard to define where the priority might sit in that regard. And I heard one or two comments that we should look carefully at this format, whether the format can be refined moving forward. And if I see more support for that, that puts me in a position where I could argue for it. But we'll wait to see how the meeting progresses and how you feel towards the end of the meeting. Maybe we'll hear more feedback as we go through the 2 weeks. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Well, just to perhaps spark a few more thoughts, I noted in the presentation that Steve made earlier that ICAO has a number of initiatives underway to connect the GASP and the GAMP together, and also the PERGs and the RASGs. Plans to draft standards with implementation in mind, which is something that's been echoed in this room this afternoon. And also thoughts on how to communicate better with you, with the states. So I'm just wondering if there's any views on how ICAO communicates with its members. Is the system that's there now working well for you? As Steve said, the procedures were drafted before the internet was invented. So, you know, there may be ways in which you feel it can be done differently. So there's a question. And deployment of new technologies, I think people have spoken a little bit about that. I see another request from IATA for the floor. So IATA, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor again. On the issue of implementation of standards and the way to communicate, we definitely need to work a little more on this to get a more dynamic system working. On the other hand, we do have to add some elements to the standard making process. Not wanting to plug in, we have a working paper 297 which speaks of that and has some ideas about it. We need to analyze impact at the very beginning of the standard making process, which we don't do now. And as part of that, the implementation rollout and specific dates have to have a very strong feedback from the states so that we don't fall into situations that we have in the past. And this isn't criticism because we're all working together on this and we're trying to do our best. But some results, as we had with English language, for example, where we had to postpone the standards, that we had with implementation of PBCS, that we're having to a certain extent now with implementation of flight tracking, just show that apart from all the efforts that we all jointly put into the standard making process, there might be a better way of creating a dynamic between the region and headquarters and all of us who are working on the original implementation of the standard to be sure that what we put out there is possible to be rolled out in all aspects. The states need to be ready to approve operations. The OEMs need to be ready to verify if what exists in aircraft are compliable with the standard, and also the operators. There's a role for all of us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ayada. And it's a good reminder that whatever we do in this House has no impact if it's not implemented outside. And that's our ultimate goal in the end, is to have seamless implementation of the plans and everything else. So we all need to work together on that. Okay, sorry, I have no calls for the floor at the moment, so Steve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to also just feedback that I heard from one of the interventions the real need for us to refine our training delivery and the linkage between the development of new provisions and standards with the training infrastructure available around the world, so that we can actually help you roll these provisions out and implement them into the airspace and into the safety systems in a manner that's reasonably timely. And I thought that was really good feedback for us. And we do have programs underway within the Global Aviation Training Initiative, which are designed to help do that. But I think working between that program and our regional offices with the trainer and other programs will be beneficial as we look towards the implementation side of the GASP and the GAMP. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's then considering the applicability dates with that in mind, of course, with the whole training rollout and considering the human in the system. This is your opportunity to give ICAO your thoughts. If there's no further calls for the floor, what would be the next step? Mr. Creamer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One other thing I heard, and I think it's great news, I heard CANSO offer implementation support through its members for the development of the implementation development that goes into a lot of the new procedures and technology that we're looking at implementing into the airspace. And that kind of support from the industry is a key portion of what I was crying for in the prior presentations. And what I would love to see over the course of this conference is a clear expression of the desire by the states to engage in a more collaborative relationship with our industry partners who are bringing the new technologies into control rooms and into the aircraft, so that we can learn the lessons that we need to from the industry, which is hiring people who have skills related to this new equipment. And then that helps us in government, whereas we heard from our colleagues, we frequently have trouble retaining individuals and expertise unless we have the way to keep people engaged with, there's more than money that makes a job worthwhile. And having access to the expertise and the training is one of the ways that we can keep people engaged in the safety side and the government support side for the industry. So thinking through ways to do that as we work through the deliberations in the conference, I think would be very much worthwhile.
Thank you, Steve. And I think that's also part of the work that's being done in the NGAP program. Any further comments or thoughts on any of these things that we've heard? I see Nicaragua, please.
Sí, muy buenas tardes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The state of Nicaragua would also like to speak in favor of strengthening regional offices, but also ask ICAO to make sure that the mechanism for all of the guidance material for all states be timely. And we'd like all the guidance material to be produced in all the working languages. It's hard to implement measures when the guidance material is not in our language. even for our experts. So this is something we would like to be borne in mind with regard to document 9859. We would like all of that document and its attachments to be in all the languages so that we can effectively implement SMS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicaragua. I'll give the floor back to IATA for their comments. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair, but I realize we have time. So another aspect is the impact we're going to receive by these not only new ways of operating, but new players in the game. We have a recent example of the impact of SpaceX on the launch process and how they grew, because they just could do it better and they could do it much more efficiently. UAS is in its infancy, and UTM is in its infancy, but we can see from the precision of flying, from what was developed, and the capabilities that Steve so well demonstrated in his presentation, that this thing's going to have a huge impact. And the problem is that it's not only a different type of operations. These are different players, and they come from a different place. Maybe one of the challenges that we have is to realize how we can get these people inside our tent, inside our deliberation process, because they might not be as motivated as we think. And that's something we need to give a thought to, how we motivate these players to integrate the ICAO process. Because right now they fly at low altitudes, they might not encroach that much in our airspace, but at one point in time, their vehicles and their technology will be able to do it, and will probably be able to do it with much more efficiency than we handle the airspace today. So it's better that we start thinking about that early. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, IATA. And just coming back as well to the point made by Nicaragua on the timely guidance material, I know that's something that in my time in the Air Navigation Commission, that the Commission spent quite a lot of time discussing about, and they fully understand the need for it. And I know the Secretariat is putting in place a new process, a new project management process, whereby they can manage more the availability of guidance material to come out at appropriate times for the standards. So hopefully that's something that you will find beneficial in the future. And with regards to the new entrants, absolutely. I mean, and this goes to the point that very many people have already made. It's about learning from each other, and we can learn from them, and they need to learn from the sort of traditional aviation community that, you know, how to play nice inside our tent, but they will be bringing us technologies and ways of working and new ideas that will help shape our future as well. Any further comments or thoughts for ICAO on the way forward? United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe, on behalf of the United Arab Emirates, that we are in the right direction in reviewing and amending and enhancing the Global Air Navigation Plan and the Global Aviation Safety Plan. We have all learned through the last few years in our states and our service providers so much in trying to implement the previous plans, if you want to say. And I think now it's the right time that we utilize this event to enhance what we have learned and improve it. I do think that in the future, maybe we need to involve more effectively our regional offices everywhere, international organizations, partners all around the world, to kick off initiatives to execute the outcomes of this conference. I do think that we should have also a smaller type of similar event in the very coming few years before the next air navigation conference, where we will all review together what we have done, instead of waiting for so many years and review the work once again. I believe that in the previous presentations from the President, from the SecGen, and from Stephen, that I think we have covered several emerging risks that will be discussed during this event. And I do think that we have to probably decide in this event, not today of course, which risks should be prioritized in order to have a better outcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, United Arab Emirates. Brazil, please.
Gracias, señora Presidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've said a lot about the plans. The plans have to be developed. But in our region, South America, we have been working together with states. And states need to support other states, and there should be mutual support. That's a good way to implement the plans. Often we talk a lot about updating the plans, but we don't have real effective measures that states can use and help one another. There aren't mechanisms for cooperation, and regional offices have a very important role to play in making these agreements happen, especially technical cooperation agreements. So I think that we should identify the support that we should give to states to give them a better shot at development and help them help one another so that no state is left behind. Everybody needs to go forward together, and there should be real and effective cooperation among states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Again, support for regional offices and regional approaches and helping states to help each other. Do you think you've heard enough feedback to keep you informed for how you want to proceed or in the future? Mr. Creamer, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this was an unorthodox trial, which we will apologize for the lack of preparation time. But I think that it is useful for us just to hear informally what your thoughts and views are on day one. After we've worked through 300 working papers and we've developed the reporting material that comes from the development of consensus around 8 agenda items, we'll be interested in seeing the updates that come from that. But we're listening in the Secretariat, along with our colleagues that we work for in the Air Navigation Commission, and with the council members who are parts of your delegation and who are attending or participating in the conference, who have a keen interest in understanding the business of the organization and how it needs to be shaped moving forward. So your insights are valuable, and we do appreciate it very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Creamer. And I think that's certainly an invitation to continue the discussion over the next 2 weeks. We'll all be discussing together in various committees and in the breaks, etc. So I think it's an ideal opportunity to keep evolving the discussion and keep learning from each other as we continue on, because that's how we're going to achieve our objectives. So thank you, everyone. No, I'm not letting him go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in this, as Steve says, quite novel approach. Before I just go a little bit further, I have a reminder for you that at 5:15 there will be a Sky Talk on cyber, and that's something that we've all heard from this afternoon, so you might be interested in attending that. The next point on the agenda is for me to introduce you to the committee secretaries, which Steve is effectively already done before we started this discussion. But just as a reminder, the secretary for Committee A will be Mr. Richard McFarland over there on the far end, Deputy Director, Air Navigation Capacity and Efficiency. And the secretary for Committee B will be Mr. Catalin Radu, the one closest to us here, Deputy Director for Aviation Safety. And I would now like to request the Director of the Air Navigation Bureau to provide any additional information on organizational arrangements.
All right, just some housekeeping. So the working hours of the conference will be from 9:30 to 12:30, and then in the afternoons from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And again, full language services will be provided during those time frames for the committees. There will be 2 short coffee breaks and a lunch break of 90 minutes in the middle of the day. Each delegation will be issued a progressive report of the conference following discussion of each agenda item. I would like to remind that this is a paperless meeting. As such, no hard copies will be provided. The final report will be approved by the conference during the closing plenary on Friday, the 19th of October. On screen is a proposal for the timetable for the conference and the coverage of the various agenda items. And before handing back over to the chair, I would like to highlight that in the delegates bag, you will find some very interesting and important information. I'd like to underline that changes have occurred compared to the printed version, so I encourage you to use the website as the main source of the program information. I wish also to attract your attention to the Sky Talks events that start as early as 8 on some days and also taking place immediately after the proceedings. And I misinformed the chair. The Sky Talk this afternoon is on the trust framework. It'll be presented by Mr. Bill Voss at 5:15. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the committees. This room will be divided into 2 separate rooms for the committees commencing tomorrow. And as today, tomorrow all of the proceedings will be broadcasted for live broadcasting anywhere that you have a device. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Before we proceed, can I just see whether there are any objections from the floor on the tentative timetable that's on the screen now? I see no objections from the floor, so we can proceed on the basis that we have approval for the organizational elements of the conference. Before I call this plenary session to a close, I would like to remind you that we have a very special event this evening, a reception hosted by the President of the Council and the Secretary General of ICAO, which will be held in the Delegates Lounge, which is below us on the 3rd floor, and also in the foyer here outside from 6 until 8. So we hope to see everyone there and to continue the discussions that we've had this afternoon. As Steve mentioned, we'll reconvene for the committee sessions tomorrow morning. Committee A will be in conference room 1 and Committee B in conference room 2. So that's this room divided into 2. And as we have quite a lot of papers to discuss and we hope to have a meaningful dialogue on all of them, could I ask you to please be here by 9:15. Thank you very much and enjoy your evening. And the plenary first day is now closed.
Thank you, Kirsten.